I'm going to review the LC convertible and explain what I mean. Before I get started, be sure to check out Cars and Bids, which is my new online enthusiast car auction site aimed at modern enthusiast cars. If you're looking to sell a cool car from the 80s, 90s, and up, list it on Cars and Bids. We have great action, and you will get the most money for your car. If you're looking to buy something cool from that era, check out Cars and Bids. We have live auctions of cool cars happening every day, all the time, and it's very enjoyable. Check out Cars and Bids at carsandbids.com. First, a little overview. Now, Lexus has dabbled in two-door cars pretty much since it first existed. There was the SC 300 and 400, which found some success. Then there was the SC 430, which found some success among the elderly. Then there were a few others, and then there was the LC, which came out for the 2018 model year, intended to be the new flagship Lexus, with a focus on sharp design and excitement. This was to be the car that showed the world that Lexus wasn't just for old people anymore. The problem is the LC Coupe has a starting price of around $94,000, and I gotta tell you, a big two-door luxury coupe with $100 grand sticker price isn't exactly going to be the first choice of young families or early career 20-something. LC has also, and frankly, not even too many of them, because old people are also choosing SUVs more and more, just like everybody else, for easier entry and exit and perceived better safety and capability. All of today's big two-door luxury cars are sales failures. The Mercedes S-Class Coupe, the BMW 8 Series, frankly, that segment is just dead. So dead, in fact, that Lexus has reportedly canceled a high-performance F version of the LC. There just isn't demand. But before this segment dies completely, Lexus is taking one last shot, a convertible. Pricing hasn't yet been announced, but I expect it'll start around $100,000. It has the same naturally aspirated V8 as the coupe with 470 horsepower, and it looks absolutely awesome, inside and out. And today, I'm going to review it. First, I'm going to take you on a tour of the LC500 convertible, and I'm going to show you all of its interesting quirks and features. Then I'm going to get it out on the road and drive it, and then I'll give it a Doug score.
What? Future of health is not a thing that tracks your heart rate night and day, that gives you the most accurate sleep data, that tracks your heart rate during your workout, that predicts your period.
Start the quirks and features of the LC500 convertible with getting in, and that means we must start with the key, which is this kind of oddly shaped, we're really trying to make it look different and interesting sort of thing, but it does look different and interesting, and I actually kind of like it, so I guess they've succeeded. Now, as for getting in, when you approach the car, you might be a little confused because the door handle is flush up against the body, so what exactly do you do? Well, if the key is in your pocket, you press the front part of the door handle, and then you can see it unlocks the door handle pops out, and then you can just pull on it and open it right up and get inside the car. Pretty simple. Or you can walk up to the car, press the unlock button on the key itself, and the door handle will automatically pop out, so same thing, you can just grab it and open the door. Either way, I really like the fact that when the door handle pops out, it exposes this top part, which has a little hidden Lexus logo on it. You don't see until the door is unlocked. That is a pretty cool quirk, a nice little hidden Easter egg. And by the way, when you get out of the car to lock the doors, just press the back of the door handle, it locks the doors, and then the door handle goes back into the door, and you can walk away. Or of course, you can just press the lock button on the key fob, like basically every other car. And next up, you climb inside to the LC, and the first thing you notice when you get in here is this is a beautiful interior. You look around and, well, there's a lot of beige in here. This isn't necessarily the color that I would choose for my LC, but the materials are fantastic. The design is fantastic. No stupid, cheap-looking plastic in the wrong places. This is a truly beautiful, gorgeous automotive interior, one of the best I have ever been in at this price point. It is a fantastic place to be. Some highlights worth pointing out. One, I absolutely love these design lines on the door panel. Instead of your typical rectangles or perfectly crafted flowing lines, these look like they're almost randomly placed there, but beautiful. It makes the door panel kind of look like art. It's really cool. And I love the door handle on the inside too. Beautiful material, and it just looks like it's floating there in place. Again, a gorgeous look that complements this interior. I also just love the lines basically everywhere in this interior. This aluminum one on the door panel. There are all sorts of sculpted, eye-catching character lines all throughout this interior, and they just look beautiful. Another thing I like in here is the aluminum trim everywhere. You can especially see it over on the dashboard and in the center control stack. This isn't cheap plastic, and it looks even classier than regular aluminum somehow. Maybe because of the tint or the finish they've chosen, but it really is a gorgeous look. Again, complements everything else in this interior. I even love the design of the dashboard in this car. This kind of strange look over on the passenger side with this stair-step pattern and the clock next to it. Again, it kind of brings a little art into this interior. Everything just looks wonderful and a little daring in here, and I really like it. But beyond the interior quality and design, there are quite a few interesting quirks in here. I'm going to start with the drive mode selector. It's not a little dial in the middle like basically every other car. Instead, it's on the side of the gauge cluster. You can see you push it up for sport mode, you push it down for comfort and eco mode. An odd positioning for it, but that's what they've done in this car. Now, a cool thing happens when you cycle through the drive modes in this car. Pay attention to the gauge cluster. You go into normal and the cluster looks normal, but you push it up for sport and you can see it gets redder and sportier. You push it up a second time for Sport Plus and it gets even sportier still with this white face looking like a true performance car, and I like that configurability. Now, speaking of that drive mode dial, on the other side of the gauge cluster area, you have another dial. You pull this one down to go into snow mode, or you push it in to turn traction control off. So there's some driving controls in that rather unorthodox place. But undoubtedly the coolest thing in this gauge cluster area is the gauge cluster itself. All right, you're looking at it, the tachometer is right in the middle, pretty standard, but you press this little button on the steering wheel and look, the tachometer moves over to the side to allow room for a new screen to appear. You press the button again and the tachometer moves back over. And this isn't some digital gauge that's just moving. This is a physical tachometer moving in place, which is just about the coolest look I can imagine. I love it. And it's a really cool party trick. Imagine trying to impress your passenger. Check out what my gauge cluster can do. And next up, another interesting control in this car is in the center console. That would be the volume dial, this big silver button in the middle. You press it to turn on the radio or off, but the volume control is the dial around it, and it feels tremendously weighty. This is probably the heaviest volume dial I've ever felt, but it gives it this high quality feeling like you're adjusting the volume on a tremendously expensive home theater system, which I guess is kind of the point. That is a cool volume dial, which is something I never really thought I would say. And speaking of the center console area, another interesting quirk in here is the center console storage lid. To open it, you push this little latch in the front and then pull it back, and it reveals a little storage area. Nothing unusual about that. The cool part is when you close it, you push the latch, and then it automatically and softly closes right up for you, which is a nice luxurious look that I find to be rather quirky. And speaking of storage lids in here, even the glove box opener is beautiful. It's this little unlabeled aluminum button on the passenger side. You push it and it opens right up. No ugly plastic glove box latch in the Lexus LC. And next up, another quirky item in this car is the gear lever, which is rather perplexing the first time you use it. Obviously, it's in the middle. In order to put this car in gear, you move it to the left and then down, and then you're in drive. For reverse, it's to the left and up, and neutral is just to the left and hold it there, and that's the gear lever. If you want to go into manual mode, pull it down when you're in drive, and then you can shift yourself using the paddles. And to go into park, you just press the big P in the center, and then you're in park. It's actually pretty intuitive once you get the hang of it, but it's different from most other car gear levers. And next up, we have to show off an important party trick of this car, and that would be the convertible top. Now, to put the top up, you open up this little panel in the center console, and you can see two switches in here. The top is over on the left. As you can see, it is a very nice and easy, relatively simple process, and when it finishes, well, quite simply, the top is in place like you'd expect from a convertible. If you want to put the top down, same deal, open up this panel, press the top switch down, and then you can see the convertible top goes down, again, exactly like you'd expect. It is a very nice and quick and easy process with obviously no manual latching or anything like that in here. You wouldn't expect that at this price point. Now, also notable is the other switch in this little convertible top control area, which looks like a power window switch, and it...
Motors, they have all the right parts at the right prices. Whether I'm on 2 wheels, 4 wheels, or no wheels.
It is, except it controls all the windows at once. You want to put them all down, you just push this switch down and all the windows drop. You want to put the windows back up, obviously it's the opposite process, just pull the switch the other way, and all of the windows go back up so you can be in an enclosed cabin. I love cars that have a all windows up or down button, and this car does. And by the way, one other notable feature about the top, while it's going up or down, a little progress bar appears in the gauge cluster to let you know how far along the top is in its top process. I guess so you don't accidentally stop partway through, you can monitor the progress and see how it's going. Now, next up, all of the buttons and switches and controls I've shown you so far have been quirky, but ultimately good. That is, until you want to turn on your heated seat, because the process is absolutely mind-numbing. Okay, in your car, you just press a little button and your heated seat is on. Pretty simple. In this car, it's in the screen. So you have to go into Menu and then navigate to Climate, and then go to Seat/Steering, and then highlight the seat you want to turn on, and then raise or lower the seat temperature. It's like a 6-step process that takes up the whole screen. So if you're navigating somewhere and you want to turn on your heated seat, well, you might miss your turn in the 3 minutes it takes you to get your heated seat on. Absolutely ridiculous. A button is always better. Please, Lexus. With that said, I will forgive a small portion of the great inconvenience of turning on the heated seats, because this car has a cool seat climate feature, and that would be a headrest heating system. Go into headrest in the screen, you can turn it on, and then warm air blows out from this hole onto your neck. So you can drive around with the top down on a cool night and not get too cold because warm air is blowing directly onto the back of your neck, which is a fantastic feeling. All convertibles should have this. I'm thrilled to see that the LC does. By the way, Lexus would answer my criticism about the difficulty in turning on the heated seats by reminding you that this car has a feature called Climate Concierge. Go into the Concierge button in the climate controls and you can just set a temperature. And then the car will use all available measures to maintain that temperature. So it will automatically turn on your heated or cooled seats, it will automatically turn on the climate control, and it will even automatically turn on your headrest warm air blowy thing, so you don't have to do any of that yourself. Lexus would say, who needs a heated seat button? The car will handle all of that for you. But anyway, speaking of the center screen situation, I am disappointed to report that this car uses Lexus's remote touch interface system, which is a disaster and a half. I have reviewed this system negatively in other Lexus models. The gist is you use this little pad in the center to scroll around on the screen, but it's very inexact. You're constantly overshooting what you're going to, and a touchscreen would be about 78 times better than this. Frankly, a dial in the middle would be better than this. Frankly, 4,000 cryptically labeled buttons throughout the interior like the cockpit of a Boeing 747 would be better than this. It is by far the worst infotainment system in the car industry today, and I think it is the low point of the LC500. A shame that such a beautiful car is saddled with such a disappointing infotainment system. With that said, I'm happy to report, aside from the seat heating and cooling and the headrest heating, the rest of the climate controls are separate from the infotainment system. These little buttons in the center control stack, which feel wonderful to push. These are some of the most climate controls you'll see, and adjusting them requires no infotainment screen intervention whatsoever, which is a good thing. And next up, speaking of screens in this car, let's go back to the movable gauge buster screen and move it over to the side so we can check out that screen over on the left. Now, this is a vehicle information screen. It shows G-forces, various other vehicle things. It also has a feature called sway warning. This monitors your drowsiness level when you're driving. If you start to sway within your lane, it will pop up a warning message there telling you, hey, maybe it's time to think about taking a break. And next up, speaking of that gauge buster screen, there's a very cool graphic that plays when you start the car. Take a look. A lot of cars now have little movies that play when you turn them on, and I think this is one of my very favorite ones, very fitting of the pomp and circumstance of the LC500. And next up, we must climb into the back seat of the LC500. Now, accessing the back seat is pretty easy. There's a little latch on the side of the front seat. You just pull it, push the front seat forward, and it automatically goes forward and lets you in. And, by the way, check out this cool Lexus logo on the backs of the front seats. I guess this is a nice little feature to make sure everybody knows this car is a Lexus when you park it with the top down in Palm Beach. Anyway, like I said, accessing the backseat is pretty easy, but actually getting back here is a bit of a different conversation. With the roof down, it's not so hard to climb in, but fitting in place is a whole different thing. You can see the seat won't even latch, let alone go back to where it belongs. And if you look in, you can tell there is no rear seat room in this car. These are some of the very smallest back seats I have ever seen in any new car. They really aren't even useful for children unless you have two adults willing to scoot their front seats way up, and so everybody is scrunched in here. This is effectively a two-seater with some storage in back. Now, that point is especially driven home when you look around back here and see the utter lack of anything. No climate vents back here, no heated seats back here, no power windows back here, nothing. You just have some seats, some seat belts for those very few times when you're actually going to use the back seats in this car. With that said, there are a few notable items back here. One is a speaker in between the back seats, an odd place to see it, but that's where it is, rather large, for an enhanced sound experience. Another unusual thing back here, the seat belts come out of the middle of the back seat, not over on the side like basically every other car, which is a little bit of an odd experience if you're trying to buckle up in back. Not that you will be. And finally, in the backseat area, you do have a wind blocker behind the back seats. Usually these are larger and removable, but this one is fixed in place and pretty small, but apparently it's functional enough to keep wind flowing over the car and make sure it doesn't mess up the hair too much of the people who are sitting inside. And next up, I want to move outside the LC and start by discussing its styling, which I absolutely love. I really, really love how this car looks. I have since it first came out as a coupe a few years ago. I think it's fantastic. These sharp lines and creases on the outside, a lot of automakers screw that up and they overstyle, but in this case, I think Lexus has done a fantastic job making this look distinctive and modern and sharp and cool, and I love the look of this car. And I think it looks better as a convertible than it did as a coupe. I think this is the more beautiful LC, especially with the top down like it is now. I think this is a beautiful, beautiful car, one of the best looking Japanese cars in years. And by the way, I also think it looks good with the top up. I think the contrasting color of the top looks nice. And I think it just generally looks fantastic. It's such a shame that nobody is buying this car because it's gorgeous, and frankly, I love to see them on the street, but I almost never do. And next up, I want to highlight a couple of pieces of particularly interesting exterior design, specifically lighting. Up front, I really like the look of the running lights, very distinctive, very Lexus, but I especially like how the running light housing starts in the regular headlight housing and then kind of goes outside of it and towards the grille. It's a very unusual look and pretty cool. I also like the front turn signal up here, which is vertical. That's not something you see very often or pretty much ever. Again, a very distinctive look for this car. But while the front turn signals are cool, the rear turn signals are especially cool. Check them out. They are also vertical, but they are even more like aggressive and bold and distinctive, and I love how they look. What a neat design back here. I also love the look of the brake lights. They're just clear when they're off. You can see you'd hardly be able to even tell that they're brake lights, but then they go on and they're red. Very different look from basically every other car. Again, adds distinction to the LC. The other cool thing about the rear lighting is how the lights look when you just have the headlights on, so the tail lights come on like at night. You can see there's this like 3D Hall of Mirrors kind of effect when you look into the tail lights. A very, very cool look, very special. Not too many cars have this, and I'd love to see it here. The only thing I don't like in terms of lighting is this material on top of the brake lights, this little chrome plastic looking material. It's so cheap and so tacky, I can't believe that someone decided to stick this material on this otherwise so beautifully materialed car. It's really a low point of the exterior when you notice it. And next up, since I'm around back, let's talk trunk in the LC. Pop it open by pressing a little button on the key fob, get it to there, and then you open it the rest of the way, and you can see it is unbelievably tiny. This is a very, very, very small trunk. You're going to have trouble getting even one set of golf clubs in here, but such is the price you pay for top-down luxury style in the LC convertible. And finally, we move under the hood where you have the engine, a naturally aspirated 5-liter V8, one of the last NA V8s powering a sports car anywhere, and I suspect this engine won't last too much longer in the days of turbocharging and fuel economy regulations and a lack of demand for the vehicles that this engine has been in, frankly. Now, like I mentioned, this engine makes 470 horsepower, which is a pretty healthy number, and around 400 pound-feet of torque, which is also pretty good. Sends the car from 0 to 60 in the high 4-second range, which is decent. But the very best thing this engine makes is a tremendous exhaust note. Take a listen now. And so, those are the quirks and features of the 2021 Lexus LC 500 convertible. Now it's time to get it out on the road and see how it drives. All right, driving the LC 500. My very first impression of this car when I get in is that it is a beautiful car. It is beautiful when you approach it. It attracts an enormous amount of attention, especially
especially for a Lexus. It is beautiful when you're sitting inside it. This interior is gorgeous, fantastic materials, great design styling. Your next impression when you drive it is that it doesn't quite drive as well as it looks. Now, that's not to say it doesn't drive well, because it's fast and it's fun and it's exciting, but it's not that fast. 470 horsepower is not that impressive. 0 to 60 in about 5 seconds. It's good, but for $100,000, I mean, that's kind of par for the course. And it doesn't handle incredibly well, ultimately. It handles reasonably well, but not crazily so. So, in terms of performance, you're not getting a 911, you're not getting an F-Type. Well, then you think about, how does it cruise? Isn't that what it's for? It's a Lexus. Well, yeah, but it's a Lexus that sounds, it's obviously not intended to be a cruiser necessarily. And you can tell that when you drive it. It drives well, it's comfortable, but it's not as comfortable as an S-Class coupe or even a Mercedes SL. In my opinion, I think that this car kind of plays this weird in-between thing between 911 and SL, and it doesn't do either of them all that great. With that said, I think there's actually a space in there for a car to exist. Someone who wants a cool, fast, fun car like a 911, but they don't want it to be as rough, or they want something that's relaxing and comfortable like an SL, but they want it to be more exciting, which the SL isn't. And this is that, and I think this would do a great job of filling that hole if the market was demanding cars in this segment anymore, but nobody cares. Ultimately, I really love sitting in this car. I love how it looks in here. I love how it sounds. I love the feel of everything. This is a really nice car. I think this car's failure is due to no fault of its own. It's a great product, and Lexus clearly took time to make it stand out from everything else. The issue is just that the segment is kind of dead. So, who's buying this car? The answer is just not all that many people. But I do kind of wonder about how this car is going to feel in 5, 6, 10 years. Is this going to be a really good used car bargain? I suspect the answer is yes. Demand is not strong in the new market. There are pretty big discounts on these. It's going to be even less strong used. As these start to come down in value, I suspect they're really going to be scooped up. I just wish the infotainment system was the regular Toyota Entune system with a touchscreen that's easy instead of stupid Lexus Remote Touch. Because Remote Touch seems bad now, but in 10, 15 years when this is really a used car, it's going to seem laughably bad. And that's going to be a real demerit for this car going forward.
And so that's the 2021 Lexus LC convertible. I really like this car. I love how it looks on the outside. I love how it looks on the inside. I enjoy the driving experience, and the V8 is fantastic. In fact, everything about this car is great, unless you're trying to turn on the heated seats or sit in the back. The problem is, it just isn't going to sell. The big luxury two-door car
E12. RPG game Beyond Good and Evil 2. So many of you want to know what happened to one of the most promising open world game out there. Well, we've got a lot of news today, and it's definitely not what you want to hear, unfortunately. It's really weird what's going on with the game at the moment, and I'm not sure if it'll ever make it out live. Now, first of all, before we get into all of this, let me just remind you what Beyond Good and Evil 2 actually is. It is an action-adventure RPG that you can play alone or with your friends in co-op. Take on enemies on planets or in space at massive massively different scales, from the close quarters inside a hidden temple to the uncharted edges of the system with your own customized spaceship, your own vehicles, and character. You'll play the adventure by yourself or with friends in a boundless and seamless online playground and encounter unforgettable characters in a stunning new planetary system that's almost infinite to explore as you struggle for freedom and the right to determine your own fate among the stars in a dark and greedy story that has you choose to do either very evil things or good things depending on your decisions. So at the moment, Beyond Good and Evil 2 is in one of the worst places it could be. Since Michael Ansel's departure from Ubisoft in September 2020, well, things have gone really downhill since. Michael was the lead visionary on the game, and thus since its departure, Ubisoft might not even have a clear idea of what to do with the project, even right now in 2022. Ubisoft being one, if not the worst video game developer and publisher at the moment, with greedy rich bosses that only care about money-making casinos in games, with microtransactions and NFTs, and agenda makers that only care about putting diversity, inclusivity elements at the risk of ruining an entire game because of it. Tom Henderson, one of the most known industry insider right now, who accurately leaked many things in the past, has said that Beyond Good and Evil 2 is suffering a development crisis from a lack of creative direction since the title went into development, which was worsened by Michael Ansel's departure from the studio in September 2020. He continued on to say, what's worse is that the game currently doesn't fit with Ubisoft's future ambitions and goals with future titles. The game has been described as Skull and Bones 2.0, and although the game hasn't been canned officially, some developers believe it is a matter of time before it is cancelled. And if some of you guys don't know what Skull and Bones is, well, it is another game by Ubisoft which is in development hell. It is a pirate game that was inspired by Assassin's Creed Black Flag, and it's in the same position as Beyond Good and Evil 2. Beyond Good and Evil 2 has been in production since pre-King 2007. The game was officially approved in 2008, and since then, it has changed direction so often, from being a sequel to Ubisoft changing it to a prequel, to being a sequel again, to being something completely different in the end right now. It's changed so much, and even today, it is told that Ubisoft doesn't know what to do with it. Ubisoft's plan has completely changed over the past year, from making single-player games with a normal story and an actual ending, to now making live service games that will never end for years to come, thus incorporating a lot of grinding. So maybe Beyond Good and Evil 2 wasn't up for that task, and so they're changing it again to fit with the plan. Tom Henderson, the insider, also tweeted not that long ago that if the game is still in development, it is several years away from being released. Beyond Good and Evil 2 is still in development, it's still several years away, said one developer that reached out after his Beyond Good and Evil tweets, Tom said. He also said he's heard of 2024 and 2025 dates thrown around a bit for the game's release date, which is so far away still. It's like this game is doomed from the beginning. Though it seems as of recently that Ubisoft is still searching for more people to work on the game, since it has opened many job listings like 3D programmers, level artists, and many more to join the Beyond Good and Evil 2 development team. Told by Ubisoft to be one of the most innovative productions at Ubisoft, Beyond Good and Evil 2 was first revealed during a Ubisoft event in 2008, and it's been 2 years we haven't heard a single official thing from it, like a new trailer or gameplay in 2022. So it's been 2 years like 2019 that we haven't seen a single trailer or little information about it. So what's happening with the game? Well, I have no idea, unfortunately, so we'll just have to wait and see in the future. But don't get your hopes up to see something soon. For more gaming news like this, make sure you guys support and subscribe.
Premium, you can watch as many videos as you want without pausing for ads. Get into what you're into with ad.
Oh, York and that Leah, they had their standoff, and York shot and killed Leah. When Allison and 355 return to him, York decides to lie, and he tells them that PJ and Leah shot each other and they both died. And he was hiding like a coward as it all went down. So York, he wanted to keep that a secret, perhaps struggling with taking his first human life. Now with this diversion behind them, the trio can now continue on their journey. They've opened up the I-40, so provisions can now continue to make their way to people across America, and they are free to head towards California. We jump back to Kansas, to that barn hot suite, with the two geneticists, the pregnant astronaut Siva, and the Russian secret agent Natalia. Natalia is guarding the base. One of the twins comes up to her and tells her that the astronaut Siva successfully gave birth to a healthy baby boy. That's right, a boy. And her new son is fine. So there is now another male out there in the world besides Yorick. Although the baby is going to be confined to the hot suite room for now until they are certain the environment poses no threat to him. Just then, Hero, York's sister, arrives, walking in the distance, and she says, "My name is Hero, and I was wondering if you could tell me where the F my brother is." And with that, we end Volume 4. Alright, so that was Volume 4. I thought the stuff with York and that dominatrix chick was pretty interesting. I had a fun time with their banter back and forth. I like that we got some exploration of York's psychology and what makes him tick, and his sexual hang-ups, and his suicide death wish he had, and that is why he kept putting himself into harm's way. And now that he has confronted that and realizes that he wants to live, he's going to stop trying to put himself into dangerous situations. So I think that was some good character development for York, although I will say it was definitely a very weird, trippy volume, maybe a little bit too weird. The Widow's Past storyline wasn't too bad. I maybe wasn't as interested in those girls as I was with maybe Victoria and the Amazons and Alter, and some of those interactions were maybe a little bit more compelling to me than these militia chicks with their conspiracy theories. But it was still entertaining. I did like the tease at the end of this volume for some future mystery. So Hero trying to get to York. We also have Siva giving birth to a baby boy. We have Allison Mann admitting that she cloned herself, as well as Allison admitting that her dad was somehow involved in cloning. So lots of mystery there. Also, that 7-Eleven girl and those people in burqas, and they killed her, and there seems to be some sort of greater culprit ring conspiracy going on with that. So lots of mystery, lots of mystery. I'm going to give this volume an 8 out of 10. Still pretty good, although I did enjoy a few of the story beats in the previous volumes a little bit more, but still a good volume. Thank you all for watching. I will be back next week with Volume 5.
Sexual excellence. I'm going to create an app and collect data. Have you selected a practice partner yet?
You're my oldest friend.
My God. Only take the men. And the flight control lady says, because we're daughters of Eve, we created sin, we tempted. Aim is just Smokey Bear, not Smokey the Bear. You wouldn't say Easter lighter in a can of hairspray and threatens to burn York. She thinks that he is one of the Amazon women. And York tells her, you don't want to spray that. The fire is going to follow the hairspray back into the can and blow up in your face and you'll kill us both. And the blonde girl says, what are you, Smokey the Bear? So Smokey Bear is that forest fire mascot created to promote preventing wildfires in the forest. York interrupts the girl and says, actually, it's not Smokey the Bear, it's the blonde girl. She sprays the hairspray and it lights York on fire, and he is forced to remove his hood and mask. And York yells at her, Jesus Christ, what is wrong with you? The girl is surprised to see that York is in fact a man. And York continues what he was telling her earlier, and he says, and by the way, the name is just Smokey Bear, not Smokey the Bear. You wouldn't say Easter the Bunny, would you? York recognizes the girl is puzzled, looking at him and wondering how he, a man, is alive. So York sighs and says, you want the long story or the abridged? So after some explanation, we learn that York, 355, and Allison have been slowly making their way to California for almost 2 years. So over the course of this series, they've been on this journey for 2 years, and now they are finally 1 to 2 days away from Allison's lab in San Francisco. The blonde girl asks York, "Aren't you scared? I mean, the world can't be safe for a handsome guy like you." Man, this girl's laying it on thick on York. York, self-deprecating as always, says, "Yeah, ladies go nuts for zits and thinning hair. I combine the worst attributes of the adolescent boys who tease them and the middle-aged husbands who left them." York asks, "So what's your name?" And she says that her name is Beth. So this girl is also named Beth, just like York's girlfriend back in Australia. To avoid confusion, we'll refer to her as Beth from Cooksville. So York, shocked to hear her name is Beth, says, "You're kidding me." And Beth asks, "What, is that name really harder to believe than York?" And York says, "No, it's just that's the name of my..." And then he pauses, and he says, "It's the name of someone I know." So I found it interesting that York didn't go into his whole long explanation of his girlfriend Beth in Australia, as he has done so many times with other women in the past. Now Beth tells York that if he came here to confess his sins, that's too bad. The church only recognizes sins confessed to a priest, and only men are allowed to be priests. And York asks her if she's a nun, and she says no. But she did study theology in university, so she knows a little bit about the church. But she's actually a flight attendant. She says, though, she likes it in the church because it has a kick-ass sound system, and it's decent sanctuary from the Amazons and looters. She usually has the place completely to herself. And York asks her, "Don't people come to Mass anymore?" And Beth says, "Older Catholics wouldn't accept a female priest, so they no longer come. A few ladies started going to the Unitarian church downtown. They've always had a woman pastor. And younger kids, they get together at these Wiccan ceremonies and worship the Earth Mother and all that crap." So York, he wants to confess to someone. So even though this woman isn't a priest, he blurts out, "I murdered a woman." And Beth replies, "What did you say?" startled a bit. And York says, "Not even a woman, a girl." And he tears up and says, "She was part of this crazy militia. She fired a gun at me, and somehow she missed, so I shot her in the thigh, but then she started bleeding, and I guess I hit an artery, and I tried to help her, but she screamed at me to stay away, and then she was gone." And Beth tells York that that's not murder, it was self-defense. And York says, "But the commandment says, 'Thou shalt not kill.'" And Beth says, "Well, it's 'Thou shalt not murder,' in Hebrew anyway." And Beth tells York about when she was a flight attendant on a plane when the plague hit. So she was working at the time. And we see her on this plane, and all the men are vomiting up blood, and all the women on the plane are screaming. And Beth, she barges her way into the cockpit, which, by the way, post 9/11, I think they locked that cockpit door, and you cannot get in. But nevertheless, she barges her way into the cockpit door, and all the male pilots are dead. And she gets on the radio to talk to the flight tower, thinking that at this time there was some sort of attack. And a woman at the flight control tower tells her, "It's not an attack, sister. This is the rapture, and God didn't choose us. Well, the Lord took them in their paradise, but we've been left behind." And Beth yells back at the flight tower woman, "This is germ warfare, not the end times. Why would God only take the men?" And the flight control lady says, "Because we're daughters of Eve. We created sin. We tempted Adam." And Beth replies, "Listen to me, you dumb cunt. You will pull yourself together and help me land this plane, or me and the dozens of women I'm carrying will kick the shit out of you in hell." The flight control woman snaps out of it and starts helping. She tells Beth what to do. She asks, did the captain have a chance to activate the ALS, the automatic landing system? Beth doesn't even know what that means. She says, "I'm not a pilot, just tell me what to push where." And she follows various instructions from the flight tower woman and pushes a few buttons, but the flaps of the plane appear stuck, so she can't get it exactly where she needs the plane to be, and the plane crash lands on the ground. Now Beth tells York, so they crash landed around here, and She ended up being the caretaker of this church after that. And York asks her how many other women survived the plane crash. And Beth holds up 3 fingers, signaling only 3 other women survived. And she feels incredibly guilty because she's since read a few flight manuals down at the local library, and she thinks that the pilot probably did activate the automatic landing system, and if she hadn't touched anything, the entire plane might have landed safely and everyone would have made it out alive. So she feels regret and sadness and guilt over this still. And York tells her, there's no way you would have known either way. You did the only thing you could have. Beth cuts York off, and thinking about their conversation earlier about Smokey Bear, she says, what about Kermit the Frog? He's not Kermit Frog, right? The in the name makes sense. Smokey Bear sounds all wrong. It's not. By the way, I think we can all agree that Smokey the Bear and Kermit the Frog sound way better with a "the" in the middle of their name. York, he kisses this Beth. Beth is definitely into it. She says, this is all I've been thinking about since you took off that mask. And York tells her that they have to be careful. Beth thinks that York is talking about condoms, and she says, forget condoms, I want to feel. And York says that, no, it's not that. It's just that every woman that he ends up getting close to ends up getting hurt in the end. York, he's referring to Sonia and PJ here when he says this. And Beth replies, I'm a big girl, York, I'll be fine, as she removes her top. Now we see, though, there appear to be some Amazon women approaching the church nearby.
I think unusual circumstances means complicated taxes. But for a TurboTax Live expert like me, it just makes things interesting. So, give us everything you've got.
What if I'm a professional gamer with a ton of expenses?
If they help track views, let's talk deductions.
What if I'm in a state with no income tax, but my survival videos are viewed in 38 countries?
I can help. And if this is a business dinner, save those turkey receipts. An interesting life can mean an even greater refund. You do your thing. We've got your taxes. Intuit TurboTax Live.
At Wegmans, we've packed our fresh and delicious salads with incredible flavor. Each one is made with our very...
Issue 25, Tongues of Flame, Part 2 of 2. Finally, our boy York is going to have him some sex. A first post-plague intercourse for York. So York and this Beth are lying in the cemetery near the church here naked. It suddenly hits York, now, that he feels guilty for cheating on his Australian girlfriend, Beth. He confusingly tells Beth from Cooksfield, Beth, I have a girlfriend, Beth. I mean, her name is Beth too. We're engaged. And Beth from Cooksfield says, so? Where is this girl? Is she traveling with you? And York explains that she's in Australia in the outback. Beth tells York, well, how do you know she's being faithful to you? She doesn't know you're even alive. And York says that his Beth is not a lesbian. But Beth from Cooksfield says that she went to an all-girl boarding school, and she thinks if this Beth is still alive, she's probably gone down under on dozens of Aussie women by now. York asks, what do you mean, if she's still alive? And Beth explains that she's sorry to tell York this, but she herself barely survived the plague, and she wasn't trapped in the middle of nowhere in the Australian outback. York feels sad, realizing that there's a good chance that his Beth is maybe dead. And Beth from Cooksfield comforts York. The two of them then go back inside the church and talk some more. York reveals that he is a magician/escape artist, but then all of a sudden they hear some ruckus outside. Something's getting thrown at the window of the church. Beth suspects it's the Amazon women. She's gonna go deal with them, and she tells York to stay down here. Beth sees 3 Amazon women waiting for her in the main area of the church. Beth offers them some flashlight batteries as a gift to make them go away. The Amazon women, though, they want to torch the church, as it is a disgusting shrine to male authority. And Beth tells them to give it a rest. If they really believe all the crap their evil dead mother told them, they would have chopped off one of their boobs like real Amazons. The one Amazon woman gets angry and goes to swing at Beth, but Beth scratches her face back. Now one of the other Amazons points her bow and arrow at Beth. Now the black Amazon woman here asks Beth, why would you throw your life away to defend this place? Do you have any idea how many crimes against women the Catholic Church has committed over the centuries? I'm not just talking about denying us our reproductive rights, our human rights. I'm talking about your nuns being brutally raped, thousands of them by priests. And the Vatican always ignored it, especially in places like Africa, because at least it meant their missionaries weren't getting AIDS from the women they inevitably defiled. And Beth replies to this, well, maybe the nuns had it coming. You've heard of the Magdalene asylums, right? And Beth explains that the Magdalene asylums were an Irish Catholic thing, spiritual sanctuaries for sinful women. You know, prostitutes, abuse victims, flirts. The hilariously misnamed Sisters of Mercy would lock these girls inside laundries and sweatshops and force them to work under the whip for their penance. And this wasn't the Dark Ages, mind you. I found out my biological mom died in one of these hellholes in 1989, so you don't need to tell me how screwed up the church was, alright? You're preaching to the goddamn choir. And this black Amazon woman replies to that. If that's true, then renounce your God. Renounce your allegiance to this patriarchal hate machine, or I kill you where you stand. And Beth says to this, patriarchal? Did you hear anything I just said? The church wasn't fucked up because it was run by men. It was fucked up because it was run by humans. If your people start burning down cathedrals, we won't have anything left to remind us of what we... All of a sudden, the lights go dark, and they hear a loud voice that says, silence! The Amazon women are a little bit freaked out, but the one says, chill, this is just a recording. But then the voice over the loudspeaker says, I am not a recording, I am Yahweh. The Amazon women say, there's somebody else in here, and the other one says, can't be, that's a man's voice. Then the loud voice continues, heretic! This is the word of the Lord. I am all-knowing and all-seeing. I know about your stepfather. I saw what he did to you at night. The one Amazon woman freaked out and says, you did? The other Amazon woman says, well, let's go. The black Amazon woman, though, says, chill, girl. And she grabs Beth and she yells at the voice, get your ass out here, God, or I'll send you one more angel. And the loud voice continues, leave my house. And we see Yorick in religious garb, and he appears to be floating, and he says, or suffer my wrath. Two of the Amazon women scream and run out of the church, but the black Amazon woman still doesn't believe it, and she says, bullshit, you don't fool me, witch. And Yorick says, oh, I am the Lord when I lay my vengeance upon you. And the black woman says, that's not real scripture. That's a line from fucking Pulp Fiction. And she's right. By the way, Pulp Fiction, one of my top 5 favorite films. And that line is by Samuel Jackson's character in the movie. Beth elbows the Amazon woman in the stomach and steals her crossbow and tells her to run away. And the woman does. Yorick tells Beth, well, you were right about this joint having a kick-ass sound system. And Beth asks Yorick, you were floating there. And Yorick tells her, that's one of the oldest tricks in the book. It's called a reverse Balducci. You can look up how to do it on the internet, if the internet still exists, that is. Yorick adds, my levitating wasn't nearly as impressive as me guessing one of those psychos was diddled by her stepdad. I was initially going to go with Uncle. Beth tells Yorick that he could have been killed, and Yorick tells her, maybe, but if I had let them kill you, they definitely would have set this place on fire with me in it. I only take calculated risks these days. The two of them then kiss. They are later on saying their goodbyes, and Yorick asks Beth to come with him, and she says, I already did twice. So they had sex at least twice. But Beth says that she has to sort some stuff out here. And Yorick says, okay, well, he'll go to San Francisco, and when he's done there with all that medical stuff, he'll come back here. But Beth tells Yorick, no, your girl let me borrow you for the night, and I'll always be grateful for that, but it wouldn't be right for me to steal you from her. And Yorick replies, see, I don't know which Beth to believe. The one back there who sounded pretty sincere when she told me my fiance was dead, or the one who sounds like she's just trying to get rid of me. Beth tells Yorick there's only one Beth for you, and she's still alive, and you have to have faith in that. We jump to Australia. First time in Australia in a long time. We see Yorick's bat is perhaps dead on the ground here. Just skull and bones and flies eating her face. But nah, that's just a random body. Yorick's bat is indeed still alive. She is walking around the Australian outback, and she discovers that skeleton body lying there in the grass. Beth tells her friend Margot to come look at the body, as well as some markings on this rock here. Beth explains that these markings mean that this is a Jamili tribe. They are an aboriginal camp for single gals, and Margot says that they should leave. She doesn't want to be offered up to the gods by this tribe like this skeleton woman was. And Beth tells her friend Margot to not be such a bigot. Aboriginal people never practiced human sacrifice. This woman was probably just some kind of accident. In fact, we should try to find the elders and see if there's anything they can do to help. But we see, though, just at that moment, the women in this Jamili tribe grab Beth and place their hand over her mouth, and they look very hostile indeed. Issue.
You've gone from watching drum solos on your phone to playing along with them in a soundproof basement. Download and rock out even when the Wi-Fi's lagging. Try YouTube Premium on us.
Are you ready for this?
Just 26. Hero's Journey. We are finally going to learn more about Yorick's sister Hero and what her whole deal is. We see Hero and Yorick as little kids. Hero is jealous of Yorick because he gets more attention from her parents than her, and she slightly resents him and messes with him by leading Yorick through a field to a statue with a hood over its head that is supposedly Queen Victoria. Hero talks to the statue and makes it as if the statue is yelling at Yorick, which makes him cry. We cut to when Hero was 15 years old at a college party. Her face is covered in zits, and she got called Pizza Face and got all upset, and she is hiding out in this bedroom. Some frat boy comes and comforts her and gives her a wine cooler and tells her not to be too upset. By the time she's out of high school, those zits will be gone and you'll still have an awesome little body. And Hero asks the frat boy, "Do you want to have sex with me?" And the frat boy says, "Yeah, right. What are you, like 15 years old?" Hero doesn't answer. The frat boy, he thinks it over for a bit, and he says, "Can you be quiet? Like, after this, I mean?" And Hero says, "Sure." So they have sex, and Hero seemed to enjoy it enough, and this is her first sexual encounter. We cut to Hero at a dinner with her parents and Yorick at perhaps Thanksgiving. She is telling them that she wants to be a paramedic. Parents are not happy. Her dad tells her, "We didn't pay for 4 years at this fancy school so you could move to Boston to drive a van." And Hero responds, "It's not a van, it's an ambulance." And Hero's mom tells her, "It's not about the money. You're an amazing writer. How can you just give up on your art?" And Hero replies, "Art is bullshit. Why should I keep working on some crap first novel when I could be out there trying to help people?" And a young Yorick, he tries to defend his sister and says, "Hey, didn't Hemingway drive an ambulance? Maybe a little real-world experience will help." Hero cuts off Yorick and says, "Yorick, are you deaf? This has nothing to do with writing." Hero's dad says that Hero is just trying to follow some other boy. And Hero says, "Joe is not just some other boy. He respects me for who I am, which is far more than I can say for any of the other men in my life." And Hero's mom doesn't want her daughter throwing away her life over some other guy who doesn't even... Hero cuts her mom off. She's had enough, and she says, "Forget it. I am so sick of this family's fiction." And she storms off. And Yorick comments, "Is it just me, or is cranberry sauce way too awesome to eat just once a year?" By the way, so fucking true. I love cranberry sauce, and I think it deserves more respect and attention in our regular meals. We cut to when the plague hit. Hero is now a paramedic. She's holding her boyfriend Joe in her arms, crying, "No, no, no, please no, not you." The one boyfriend in her life that seemed to actually truly love her. Another paramedic tells Hiro to put on this gas mask now. Joe's dead, all the men are dead, and we have to help the living. But Hiro, angry, says, no, they can help themselves, and she abandons her job and walks away. We cut to a grocery store. Hiro is so hungry. She's eating cat food. She hasn't eaten in a week. She runs into some of those Amazon women who attempt to take the food from her, and they tell Hiro, "Real women hunt. We're going to have to take that food from you for your own good, to break you from being a helpless gatherer like our oppressors wanted us to be." And Hiro fights back, hits the girl with the can, and kicks the other girl. But Victoria is there. Victoria you'll recognize as the leader of the Amazons. Victoria is watching Hiro, impressed with her, and she offers Hiro an orange to eat, and eventually invites Hiro into their Amazon group. Cut to Hiro in the women's prison in Marysville. She busts out of her cell. Remember, we saw her plotting her escape when she was in Marysville. But we kind of assumed maybe she escaped right away. But we see here, she broke out of the cell, but Hiro was then immediately caught and confronted with some of those Marysville women. They stop Hiro, and they realize that Hiro still has a long way to go before she can be deprogrammed from Victoria's brainwashing. So they continued to deprogram her, and we assume that they were eventually successful and let Hiro out of the prison. We cut to Hiro meeting her mother in Washington. Hiro says, "I was sick, Mommy, but I'm better now, promise. This is my chance, our chance, to make things right." She's going to try and help her mom track down Yorick. We cut to where we last saw Hiro, confronting Natalia and the twin geneticists at the barn in Kansas. Hiro thinks that these women are maybe the Israelis that are keeping Yorick hostage, but Natalia explains the whole situation and they are not the Israelis. Hiro is still under the impression that Agent 355 of the Culper Ring kidnapped her brother, because that's what her mother told her. But Natalia explains that Yorick went with 355 of his own free will, and it didn't look like he was being kidnapped. They talk some more, and eventually Hiro gives them her gun, and they show Hiro the astronaut Siva downstairs with her baby boy. The new baby boy, his name is Vladimir, named after the boy's father. So the Russian astronaut was the father, not the African-American astronaut. Hiro comments that the baby is beautiful. Hiro now trusts these women and sees that they are doing good. But Hiro, even though she was deprogrammed, she still hears Victoria's voice in her head. And Victoria says to her, "You never should have surrendered your firearm. Don't worry, you can still smash the glass with that fire extinguisher behind you and crush his little skull before they know what's happening. It's not too late, Hiro. It's not too late for you to save the world." Hiro, though, she starts fighting and repressing those urges and trying to repress Victoria's voice in her head. And we see Hiro looking at the glass and seeing Victoria's reflection in it, just imagining her. Alright, now the... storyline in this volume, issue 27, Ring of Truth, chapter 1 of 5. We jump back to pre-plague time. Yorick, he's in a magic shop buying stuff. In a little joke, the clerk tells Yorick, "Yorick, I just received some fascinating items from the Middle East. This, for example, is the only skeleton key in the world that can open the unpickable handcuffs created by Israeli Secret Service." So if Yorick bought this skeleton key back then, he would have been able to break out of those unbreakable cuffs that Alter Leon put him in later on. But York, he kind of ignores the clerk and says, "Actually, I'm here looking for an engagement ring." And York says that his girlfriend Beth doesn't want a diamond. She says it funds wars in Africa or whatever. So the clerk shows York a ring that he picked up from his trip overseas. The ring glistens gold in one light and silver in another. It represents the male and female sides which all of us possess. And it only cost about $300, which is, by the way, not that much for an engagement ring. So York decides to buy the ring. We jump to the current day. York, 355, and Allison have been in San Francisco for a few weeks, spending time in Allison's